I'm Dave Garrett. Thanks everybody for showing up. I'm a co-founder at Club dVIN. Today we're going to talk about NFTs and wine, and in particular we're going to focus in on how NFTs can provide or the utility that you can be attached to NFTs when NFTs are used with wine. And we're going to talk about a couple of different kinds of NFTs today. I'm going to assume that everybody has a pretty kind of a working knowledge of NFTs and blockchain, a little bit at least, and also a healthy interest or at least a curiosity about wine. That said, if you ever have if you have questions at any time, please feel free to raise your hand or and put a question in the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer every question before we stop here today. I think we're going to go for about 45 minutes. So as we're getting close to that, I'll start. If there are any questions left over, I'll start making sure that we get through them. So again, I'm Dave Garrett with Club dVIN, and very happy to welcome Dan Petroski, who's one of our founding members, and also just an all-around great guy and winemaker. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, David. Yes, I'm Dan Petroski. I'm a winemaker here in Napa Valley. I jokingly say I'm a recovering Cabernet Sauvignon winemaker. I've made the Cabernet for Larkmead Vineyards for 15 years. And on the side, I've been hustling a project called Masakan, which is Napa Valley's only white wine winery. It has garnered a lot of traction over the years. It's been a small brand that's growing. And I'm trying to grow it outside of just wine. I'm trying to grow it into the into the blockchain, into the metaverse, into the world of NFTs. I did actually produce and make and sell Masakan NFTs last year on OpenSea in the summer of last year. I've been interested in the blockchain and NFTs since the origin days of CryptoKitties. So it's nothing new for me, and it's just great that we can actually talk about it and find people to talk to about this stuff today. And you mentioned earlier about my climate activism. I'm on the board of the Napa Valley Grape Growers, on the board of Napa Green. I manage industry issues and climate committees in both organizations, and it's really important to me because without a working relationship with Mother Nature, the agricultural product that we produce and we all love to drink wouldn't be here. So the world is going through this roller coaster ride with climate, and I think that part of the things that we'll talk about today with the technology of the blockchain and NFTs, it's going to be really cool to record the provenance of wines from grape to glass, from soil to glass, including all the data that goes behind it. And that'll be a really useful tool for scientists and for academics as we move forward. So that's part of it that I keep my one side of my brain thinking about all the time. So looking forward to digging in.
Great. Well, thanks again, Dan. And he's a little over modest. I would say Dan is a genuine cult winemaker from California. His wines regularly sell out very, very quickly. And I would challenge anybody to go and try to find a bottle. I've tried. They're pretty hard, pretty rare and hard to come by these days. So like I said, we're going to talk about 3 different kinds of NFTs today. With regards, we're not going to actually talk very much about Club dVIN today. I think we actually have a bunch of Club dVIN members already on the call. I'm looking at some of the names of the attendees, and I see a bunch of members out there, and that's great. So we're not going to talk so much about the club today. If you're interested in knowing more about the club, please send me an email or get on our mailing list, and you'll get some more information about future webinars. That just takes a lot of time to talk about the club. But we are going to talk about 3 different NFTs that kind of revolve around wine, and some of them have been around for a while, and some of them are kind of new products that we at dVIN have sort of created. First, we'll talk about allocation NFTs or allocation tokens, which are NFTs that represent or give the holder of that NFT rights to an allocation of wine. Next, we'll talk about digital corks. And digital corks are like a digital twin for a bottle of wine. So it's an NFT that represents ownership and has a lot of information and utility about that wine. And then we're going to talk about tasting tokens, which is more of a proof of experience that shows that you've tasted that wine, and there's some kind of interesting, again, information and utility involved in that. But let's start with allocation tokens. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about how allocations work in the wine world without NFTs, and then maybe we could talk about how NFTs might make that more interesting and create some more utility.
For sure. I think a lot of people don't realize how small Napa Valley is. So I'm going to use Napa because that's where I'm sitting right now as an example. But Napa Valley only sells 2.5 to 3% of all the wines sold in America. So we start off at a really small place. We start off at a place where there's not a lot of total volume and supply. That's why if you've been around the Napa Valley for the last 20, 25 years as a buyer, as a collector, you've been probably familiar with the winery allocations, because no one winery makes enough wine to supply the full demand of Napa Valley wines. Napa Valley brand is huge. So you would normally get onto a mailing list, and if there was enough wine made that year, you would have access to those wines. The famous example, non-Napa Valley, was Sine Qua Non and Manfred Krankel. He used to send postcards out to his mailing list members if they didn't get on the mailing list. Just a wonderfully nice, kick in the gut. But he says it so eloquently and says, "Sorry, not again this year. You're not going to get any wine. We don't have enough wine to sell." So allocations are really just kind of your foot in the door to limited supply, high demand product, and things like Sine Qua Non down south of California and Napa Valley, because of our limited land to produce wine, a lot of wineries here will offer you a small amount of wine, whether it's in a club-like format, membership format, where 2, 3, 4, 6 bottles or 12 bottles maximum, or just the allocation to be able to purchase and then wine until sold out. You're allocated, you get in, but if it's sold out, it's sold out. You got to get there first. So that's kind of like why Napa Valley has been such a high demand, high price product. It's just really about lack of supply.
Yeah. So the story that I always heard about Sine Qua Non was you'd get on the wine list, or you'd get on the mailing list. Well, no, you wouldn't get on the mailing list. You'd get on a list that would then, after a few years on the list, if somebody dropped off, you could get on the mailing list. And if you were on the mailing list for a few years, then you could get on the allocation list. And then your first year on the allocation list, you can buy 1 bottle. And then sometimes that's for a couple of years. And then like a couple of years later, you could buy 2 bottles. That would be your allocation, which is pretty insane. But that's the true definition of a cult wine, right? And there are a bunch of a lot of wineries in California and certainly in Europe that kind of have that same thing. If you look at 100 Acre or Harlan or Bond, or there's Screaming Eagle, Colgan. There's probably a good 2 or 3 dozen wineries that are very, very highly allocated in California, and then there's probably another 100 or so that are difficult to get on the list or difficult to get an allocation from. So the way an allocation token works, or the way NFTs work with wine allocations, or the way that we've sort of been structuring them, is it provides an interesting value both for the winemaker and for the person who's getting on the allocation list, or that's buying the allocation NFT. Because the way it works with Sine Qua Non, for example, is with Sine Qua Non, if you drop off the mailing list, I think if you don't buy for, I think if you don't buy even for 1 year, you're off the list, and then they replace you with somebody else. And that's all great, but there's no real there's no real value to being on that list other than you get to buy that wine. What we've kind of talked about and what we're working on right now is an allocation token that would be an asset. Because you have the right, with the holder of an allocation would have the right to buy a certain number of bottles. It could be a percentage of the production. We talked to a couple of people that are interested in having allocation tokens that would represent 1% of the production or 0.5% of the production. That's an interesting model as well. That's more for producers that have wild swings in their production, that don't, where 1 year they might have 6,000 bottles, and the next year they might have 12,000 bottles. So in that case, that it would be more of a percentage than just a number of bottles. But the idea is that that the consumer or the person who wants that allocation would purchase an NFT that would represent, let's call it 6 bottles a year. And they might purchase that for a few $100s in the case of some wineries, or a few $1,000s in the case of some wineries. And what that does is it provides kind of an interesting value proposition for both the winemaker and the consumer. So for the winemaker, they get some working capital, right? If you sold 1,000 allocation tokens at $500 a piece, that'd be $500,000 that you could use as working capital for that brand. For the consumer, it's pretty interesting as well, because for the first time, it kind of lets the consumer have an opportunity to participate in the value creation for the brand or for the winery, and in fact even be rewarded for getting involved early, right? So if you look at a winery like Massican, for example, that sells out every year all the time, if you were the more demand there is around the world for that wine, the more critical acclaim, the more people really want to be able to buy that wine, or even the more people want to participate in some of the other utility that NFT provides, then the more desirable the NFT is and the more valuable it is. So 20 years from now, if Massican, and I'm sorry to use you an example, but if Massican is like a true, a cult wine like Sénéchouan, then the value of that allocation, the right to be able to buy a certain number of bottles, could be an asset that's valuable and something that somebody else wants to buy. So having that market, it's really interesting. It provides value for the winemaker in terms of working capital. It provides value for the consumer in that, you're being early, or you're having that allocation as an asset rather than just almost a liability for in some cases. Does that make sense to you, Dan? I'm sorry, I talked for a long time there.
No, it's perfect. My prior life is 10 years in magazine publishing, and we were subscription based. So in order to buy Time magazine, you bought it at a newsstand, or you subscribed to it and it showed up in your mailbox. So there was a price you paid to have that access to something arriving in your doorstep every week. For me, I think about, yes, my wine does sell out. There will be no Massican available in the country for 3 to 4 months of the year. And unfortunately, when I deal with some of the markets, I only have 12 markets that the wine is available in of the 50 United States. And I have a mailing list that spans the 50 United States. A big chunk of that mailing list is on Gmail. A big chunk of that mailing list didn't receive my emails for my release this past 2 weeks, because Gmail set different privacy segments. And when I think about it that way, I know that there are customers who have purchased Sauvignon Blanc for me, for an example, in the past, who never saw that email come out. And guess what? Right now, my Sauvignon Blanc is sold out after 3 weeks. And now that customer is screwed, because I can't provide it for them. I can't take the allocation I gave to my distributor in California or New York or Texas back from them. That's just not good business, good relationship business. So for me, I love this allocation model, this club model, the guarantee model. As long as it's tied to some sort of incremental benefit. The NFT alone, is that enough of a benefit? I think so. It's a great piece, potentially a great piece of art. But also, just brainstorming something like free shipping for life. If you buy this NFT, you will receive your allocation plus free shipping for life, and you never have to worry about missing an email ever again, because it went into the Gmail promotions folder. So I think allocation tokens and access, and it's not exclusivity, it's exclusivity because we offer a certain number of them, based on, but that can grow. If every single member of my mailing list chooses to buy into this, I am not going to turn the water off. I'm going to keep it going. If I have more, again, as David said, if you have more demand than you have supply, that's a good thing. If you can meet the NFT, the blockchain is a beautiful thing because it's such an early infancy that we can continue to grow on the blockchain. We can actually give 100% allocation to our mailing list. And I think that's, that's an ultimate goal. Will we reach that? No, 99% of the mailing list may not know what NFTs are, but they like the idea of access and free shipping. So we just onboarded someone to a concept of blockchain and NFT and provenance and history. And then, as David said earlier, with allocations go into digital corks, which then go into tasting tokens. Now you take them down the value chain of community from being early accessor to someone who then drinks and shares, and then it takes it, that's where the community starts to build, and that's where dVIN comes in my eyes.
So one of the things that we're talking about today is utility, and obviously having having an allocation to a particular winery is it's not new. People have had allocations for a long time, but with the NFT, there's other utility that can be provided, and we've talked a little bit about that before, Dan. Like having utility. For example, your NFT could be the ticket to come to your famous pickup parties, or the ability to buy. You have a project. Maybe you could talk about that for a minute, where you're making some wine from around the world with in collaboration with some other winemakers. So that NFT might give you access to purchase those wines, or priority access to purchase those wines. Have you thought a little bit about what kind of utility could be attached to an allocation token, other than free shipping for life, which I think is great, but other than that, that might be kind of interesting and unique?
Yeah, for sure. The collaborative projects, small projects where the wines are going to be super hard to get. They're going to have very limited footprint. So having early access to that is just one benefit. I think of the wine industry. We always talk about provenance. You think about NFTs and the blockchain, it was built based on housing. It was built based on housing contracts. We think about how the medical industry can potentially use your crypto wallet and your digital signature, and all of your medical records are going to be available to you. I mean, this is no different than what Apple's trying to do with the Apple Watch and Apple Health and iHealth. We are now just starting to think about how we bring the wine into that space. Right now, we're all enthusiastic wine drinkers and collectors, and we love the bottles that we've, if I had an NFT of the bottle that changed my life, that non-vintage bottle of Pleiades that I drank at Le Bernardin in 1999, if I had that NFT, I'd be really happy. If Sean Thackeray is listening and the Pleiades Wine Company wants to release the 1999 NFT of Pleiades, I would buy that fucking thing. It's kind of like NBA Top Shots, and watching your favorite sports. I'm a New York Football Giant fan. There's so many plays that I play over in my head from memory of great events in Giant football history, that if I had the rights to ownership of that, or music. So we're just starting, David, to kind of think about how to use this in wine. My whole kind of niche with Mastercon is, it's not about the wine, it's about the kind of escapist experience of moving, transporting yourself from that glass to where that origin idea and inspiration comes from, but it's your own personal subjective kind of experience. And that's what I use Masakan as a vehicle, and I'm hoping to figure out a way with Club dVIN and allocations and digital corks and tasting tokens and artwork to make Masakan this kind of a community of people who are using technology to hopefully escape. Masakan in the metaverse is coming. I own land in multiple metaverses, and I'm working with a design firm in London right now to kind of design that out. So it might be that
That's
you
awesome.
need to be a Masakan NFT holder to gain access to my quote unquote bar Masakan social club. But I'm not an isolated person. I'm not about exclusivity. I'm about everyone could come in as long as I have enough food to feed them, enough wine for them to drink.
I love that. I love that. I want to talk about that in a minute when we get to digital corks and tasting tokens. But we have a couple of questions that I want to get to before we move on to digital corks. So Stephanie asked about would a winery need to put 100% of their existing membership on an allocation system? I don't think so. I think that almost everyone that we're talking to is doing a very limited release in the beginning, either some sort of new cuvee or a reserve, or sometimes it's with a new wine. We're talking to, and we'll release some of these names later, but we're talking to a bunch of winemakers that have, maybe it's a new label that they're experimenting with allocation tokens with. So I don't think that any winery would necessarily need to move their entire membership onto an NFT platform. I think in the beginning, certainly from our perspective, and one of the reasons that we started Club dVIN is we wanted to kind of create a group of people that were early adopters and that were going to really use the technology and get into it, so that we could learn a bit about it and then grow from there. And I think that would be my advice to any winery that wanted to work with, whether it's us or anybody else, to do allocation tokens or digital corks, is to start with identify your early adopters, identify the people that are going to get into it and really love using it, and really work with them first, and then expand to the rest of your membership or the rest of your customers. The other question is about how it's different from Unpremiere or Unpremiere. I always pronounce it wrong and get yelled at, other than being digital. And what I would say is, I think it's pretty different because it's a contract, right? Like every NFT, or most NFTs, are smart contracts, and that contract has rules. And the rules behind an allocation NFT would be that the holder of that NFT is granted the right to a certain number of bottles a year. It's not an allocation that's granted sometimes and taken away sometimes. I mean, from my perspective, there are certainly business considerations why an allocation might be granted or taken away, but that it's pretty, it's free flowing. The winemakers can kind of do whatever they want on a year-to-year basis. Whereas with an allocation token, that's yours. You have the right to that number of bottles every vintage for forever. That's kind of the idea behind it, or at least for as long as the contract runs. Maybe you can do an allocation token for 10 years or for 20 years or 30 years. So because it's a contract, it becomes an asset, right? Like you can be on the mailing list for Sine Qua Non, and you could have been on that mailing list for 20 years, and you have a 6-bottle allocation. No one's going to buy that. You can't sell that to someone. You can't take that asset, that right, and sell that to somebody else, because A, maybe it wouldn't be honored, and B, if you sold it to someone else, and B, like that's not a thing. There's no contract that says that you have the right to a certain number of bottles. That's kind of just a thing that Manfred says, right? So it's what it really does is it makes it digital, but it also makes it a contract, and it makes it something that is like it's a contract between the holder of that NFT and the winemaker, and as such, it becomes, an asset for the holder of the NFT, and it becomes some cash flow or some working capital for the winemaker. Does that? And Stephanie, let me know if that didn't answer your question. Although I think we're going to move on. Unless Dan, did you have anything to add to that?
No. And her follow-up question is about existing club members. It's a great question, because I don't come from a place with club membership, with subscription base, and so I think that you're gonna have to look at your total allocated benefits right now for being a club member, and see how you can take that to the next level to get them to buy in. And I as David was talking in the beginning, I'm not expecting a lot of my members to buy into this. I want 100% buy-in, but I'm not expecting a lot of them to buy into this quote unquote free shipping for life, early access, guaranteed wine. I always have low expectations for everything I do, so but it seems to have been working out. But yeah, so I think it's just about the energy, the enthusiasm, and bringing people on. And I think David said it great earlier. He's like, work with the people that are engaged, work with them that are interested. They're going to find their community within your brand, and then hopefully they're going to be evangelists to other communities. And I think that's a big that's a big thing that we all who are on this call as interested parties have to be continuously engaged with, kind of like pumping up, not pumping and dumping stock and cryptocurrencies, but it's like getting people excited about the potential, because the potential is limitless, and we don't really know where it is right now or where it's going. It's going to be, Club dVIN's going to be a different place in 5 years than it is today.
It's going to be a different place in 5 minutes. It's moving pretty fast right now. So let's talk for a minute about digital corks. So we're moving on from the allocation token provides you with access to, or provides you with the right to buy a certain number of bottles. A digital cork is a digital twin, or an NFT that is attached to the bottle. So when I say attached to the bottle, what I mean is there's some sort of unique identifier in the bottle, and that unique identifier is linked to an NFT on the blockchain. And that can be linked in a bunch of different ways. We've talked about using NFC stickers, which is like the technology that's in your credit card when you tap to pay. So you could tap your phone against the bottle and it would pull up that NFT. There's QR codes. A lot of wineries use QR codes to uniquely identify the bottles. There's serial numbers. A lot of wineries still they print unique serial numbers. I know Lynch Bage is still engraving a unique serial number on every bottle that comes out of Lynch Bage, which is, that if that's the way you want to do it, that's great. But the idea is that digital cork serves a purpose, and I just want to say that this is really what we're talking about here with digital corks, at least for right now. It's really suited for collectible wines, investment grade wines, cult wines that not only are hard to find and difficult to obtain, but also wines that will likely change hands a few times before they're consumed. And I know that it's a little different for you, Dan, and we should probably talk about that in a minute. But for a lot of the wines that we're talking about, they might come out of the winery, and then they might be bought and sold. The average investment grade wine is sold 3.5 times for over an average of 15 years before it's opened. So before it's consumed. So the digital cork does a bunch of different things. So it serves as a deed of ownership. So you own this bottle. It identifies you as the owner of the bottle. It's a certificate of authenticity. It says this bottle came from the winery, or in some cases it came. We're talking about Sotheby's, and maybe it was authenticated by Sotheby's or by any one of a bunch of different authenticators. It also provides a chain of custody. which is, every person that owns the bottle, and everywhere that bottle goes, it's recorded on the ledger. So that's a huge disincentive against fraud and counterfeit. So you can see all of the people that own that bottle, and so it's a big disincentive against committing fraud or counterfeiting the bottle. And then there's one kind of also very cool thing for winemakers, which is if that bottle is sold in the aftermarket, in order for the NFT to move along with that bottle, as part of the smart contract, a royalty gets sent back to the winemaker. And that royalty can be set, some winemakers might set that at 2% and some might set it at 20%, depending on how much they want to disincentivize speculation. But the idea that the winemaker can participate in, aftermarket growth or aftermarket value creation is that's kind of new and interesting and fun. So that's what a digital cork is. It just provides kind of that value. But maybe one thing that we could talk about is Dan, you in particular, your wines more than likely probably aren't going to be sold in an aftermarket. Once a consumer buys your wine, they're more than likely going to hold on to it and consume it. What kind of utility over and above the kind of chain of custody and proof of ownership, what kind of utility are you thinking about providing to owners of your bottles?
No, I love the supply chain or consumption chain, even though you aren't consuming the movement chain. And I do think that the way you're describing it, I start looking at it because my brand isn't about, as you said, it's not a collectible brand. I don't build these wines at Masakan for long-term storage. I build them for by the glass drinking in the spring, summer, fall when they're released. And prior to the pandemic, 33% of every bottle I produced was poured by the glass in the United States at a restaurant. So I start thinking about the utility of, I know we're as a membership-based organization, we're trying to build, a kind of a community of individual wine drinkers and collectors. I think about when my wine goes to, a distributor, and then from a distributor to a store or a restaurant, when we get to the place where inventory, that last day of the month that every restaurant somm dreads is inventory. And I think about that when it goes all the way to that final destination into that restaurant at the Den, and then it's poured the next day by Aldo and his team by the glass. Like, I start thinking about how that impacts me as a winemaker. How does it impact a consumer? It doesn't. I think it's what it provides me is more transparency to where my wines are going. When you work with small distributors all over the world or all over the country, they don't really have the infrastructure to kind of follow the bottle of wine around. And they don't send you a lot of information about that. So you're kind of left out there wondering where your wines are sold and how they're sold and who's drinking them. And I think that once we see that, that's also a positive to the consumer. As David described, the transactions of like going from a Masakan to a Sotheby's to a collector to another collector. I think that alone is an incredible opportunity to kind of just understand the kind of impact, the footprint of your bottle over time. And I think that's as we go into a world where we are thinking about our not only our physical footprint and our carbon footprint. I think understanding how your wine is moved around as a consumer is going to help you make better choices, and you're going to be able to see all that prior to purchase. And I think that's pretty cool. But it's part of the bigger. For me, David, it's like the allocation is your membership to the Masakan Club. The digital cork is your physical asset that you're going to consume, and then the tasting token is what you share. You always, when you pull that cork, you always share a glass of wine. No bottle of wine is built to be drunk by one human. It's built to be drunk in pairs and twos and threes and fours. So this is where we start to have that community aspect to it. That's how I look at it. But it's more value to me, the supplier. But the experiential value is the sharing part, which goes into the tasting tokens, from the digital cork to the tasting token.
We've talked a little bit. So one of the ways that utility can be conferred with an NFT is, a lot of people kind of are confused about that. And I want to talk about it a little bit, kind of how it works. So Web3 it's interesting in that it's kind of a, I don't want to talk about it too simply, but it's kind of it's an ownership model, right? Like with Web2, all of your data and everything is all of your data, all your information, all of your personal information, all of your history, everything is owned by Google and Facebook and Twitter and everybody else. With Web3, the idea is that you own those things, right? So, for example, when you go to our website, or when you go to a website like Rarible or OpenSea or one of these kind of Web3 marketplaces, you're not signing in with a username and password. You're actually signing in with your wallet. You're using your crypto wallet or your Web3 wallet to sign in to the website. And the website is then using the NFTs and the information in your wallet to create an experience for you. So one of the things that we've been talking about as far as utility is concerned for people that own the digital corks is using your wallet, for example, to be able to sign in to a virtual tasting. So if you wanted to do, once a month, or in some, if you wanted to do virtual tastings, or a winemaker wants to do virtual tastings with their consumers, the idea is that you can provide a really kind of special experience for people that own the wine, and that they own the wine because the only people that can sign in to that experience have those digital corks in their wallet. You've also seen a lot of, some of the other NFT clubs have used those NFTs as tickets to an event, for example. You use that in order to RSVP to, in your case, maybe a pickup party or a concert, or whether it's a virtual in real life event, then, providing, you need to have that NFT in order to make a reservation or in order to get in, it's your ticket. We've also seen, and this is kind of interesting as well, the ability to, for example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club did this really well, right? If you have a Bored Ape NFT, then you can sign into their website using that NFT, and you have the ability to purchase gear, right? You get the Bored Ape sweatshirt, or you get the Bored Ape hat, and those are things that you can only get if you have that NFT in your wallet. It's the only way that you can get it. And I don't know if a sweatshirt and a hat is very interesting, but certainly, those limited allocation wines that you're working on in collaboration around the world, like the ability to be able to sign in with your wallet, and because you have a certain number of bottles or a certain number of digital corks in your wallet, now you have the ability to be able to buy buy those special bottles, or maybe if you've got an awful lot of bottles, maybe you get the ability to get Dan to cook dinner for you sometime. But the idea is that you can provide special, you can really provide special benefits, rewards, incentives to people that are your most passionate consumers, and that they're your most passionate consumers because they have that collection of NFTs.
And you reminded me, David, as you were talking about what a digital cork is to me. I think about, as a consumer of wine, not just as a wine producer. I go to a retail shop, or I go to a winery's website, I purchase wine. I don't know when I'm going to get it. It's the middle of the summer. It's always hot in California. No one can ship it. I give them my money. They hold on to my wine. They ship it in October or whenever. I pay exorbitant amount of money to ship it overnight, which is not great. And I think about the delay of when you actually get your wine. And if you're drinking, if it's a young, fresh wine like Mazzacane, you're going to drink it within a few days of getting it, or a few weeks or a few months. If it's a collectible bottle, you don't really need it right away. It's going to sit in your cellar for a while. But I think about, once you transact money with me, I feel guilty that I'm taking your money, and you may not see your wine for 10 days or 2 weeks. I think this idea of the digital cork being accessible immediately upon that transaction gives the consumer value within simultaneously with their purchase, so that they now have ownership of this not only the NFT and the contract for that wine, and it sits right there in their wallet at the moment of point of purchase, and then the wine's coming down, the physical product's coming down the pipe. It may be a week or 10 days or maybe overnight, we don't know, but I think that is a concept, to me, shows a greater customer service from a business to consumer than right now the social contract of someone paying for something and just waiting for when it's going to show up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's cool. And actually, so let me talk about tasting tokens, and as part of that, I'll put a button on what you just said. So the next kind of NFT that we'll talk about is the tasting token, and that's something that we're kind of doing exclusively. I mean, I think that I've seen, at least in concept, some other people talking about allocation tokens, and certainly there are some examples of people that are doing digital twins with wine. But a tasting token is really something unique. I think we're the only people that are doing that. And how a tasting token works is it's a proof of experience. So I'm happy to kind of, anybody on the call that would like to at some point kind of see a demo, I'm happy to, we do all kinds of demos one-on-one. We can send out links, and maybe we'll do that tomorrow. We'll send out links to everybody if they want to sign up for a small group demo. But the way a tasting token works is, if you have a digital cork in your wallet and in your crypto wallet, and you open that physical bottle, then you can sign on to our website with your wallet. You're signing on with your wallet, and with that digital cork in your wallet, you can pull the digital cork. So you're basically executing executing the contract, right? What that does is it's the end of the line for that chain of custody for that wine. But then it gives the owner the ability to mint new NFTs and to give them out to all the people that you're tasting the wine with. And those NFTs we call tasting tokens, and it's the Web3 version of kind of taking a picture of the label and posting it to Instagram. And speaking of which, I don't know if anybody saw, but this week Instagram rolled out the ability to be able to connect your wallet to Instagram and show off galleries of your NFTs. So imagine, instead of having to like take a picture and write down all the information for the wine and post it to your Instagram, you just, you scan a QR code, and that tasting token NFT, which is not only, more beautiful than just your standard picture of a bottle, but also, has all the metadata in it. Now that is an NFT that immediately appears in your Instagram feed as a verified proof of experience that you tasted that wine, and you can see all the people that you tasted it with and when and where. Like that's pretty cool. And that's a very interesting way, I think, for a winemaker to create a piece of content that's an interesting story around the wine, and then in your case a few months later, or in some people's cases 15 years later, like that story then appears in their Instagram feed as a way to like tell the story about that wine. It's more than just a label, and we can show people a little later what tasting tokens look like. But that to me that's a very interesting process. Let me pause for a second. First, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. And Dan, if you wanted to, just follow up on tasting tokens from your perspective, then maybe we could talk a little bit about utility before we go. And we're over time a little bit, but I promise we'll be done in 5 minutes.
No, I think David, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I like this, the throughput of, from the allocation opportunity to the digital cork to the sharing. Again, wine is about sharing, and sharing experiences with those bottles. I remember the people I sat at dinner. I was just joking about that Pleiades. I remember the people I was at dinner with that evening, and how that whole situation came to pass. I remember the same thing about my first harvest dinner and drinking an 85 Haut-Brion when I worked at Dumont in 2006. All of those experiences, I want to share them with the crowd that's at the table. Wine for me has never been a lonely object. It's always been a kind of a shared celebratory object, and being able to kind of do that with the people you're experiencing with it's an important aspect of this entire community, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. And when I think about, we talk about utility all the time and say this is a way for a winemaker to really expand their audience or expand their consumer group organically, right? Like if you pour a wine for someone, then all of a sudden now they've tasted that wine, and the winemaker maybe can reach out to that person and say, hey, I see you tasted our wine for the first time. I hope that you really loved it. And if you collect, 5 tasting tokens, maybe we'd love to invite you to a winemaker dinner. And learn more about it. Or if you collect 10, maybe we can invite you to the winery for a vertical tasting, or maybe we can give you an allocation. Like that could really be an interesting way for a winery to start building community, to start creating experiences, and to start really increasing their or building their community organically by the people that are tasting their wines and by the people that are sharing their wines. And I think that's really cool.
I mean, and that's the ethos of just the whole of everyone on Discord and everyone with these new projects. I mean, if you're, I follow Super Plastic, and I follow Steve Aoki, and I follow Snoop Dogg and all, and as you're engaging with their NFTs, as you're engaging with their product, you gain levels. It's like playing a video game. We're all competitive. You just continue to gain levels, and with each level, you are receiving added value, added extra benefit, added exclusivity, or added early access to events, and that's just cool to me. I mean, I've been the beneficiary just because I love some of the art that I've been collecting as NFTs. I've been the beneficiary of getting some really cool opportunities to access things, and I think that as long as we take that kind of vibe to the wine space, it could work out really well.
So let me throw out like kind of a crazy utility from the future, but in the metaverse, one thing that could be really interesting is, and interesting for you to do with Massican in the metaverse is, somebody receives a tasting token. So if you, somebody pours, someone who's on your list and gets a digital cork and is part of your community, they pour wine for a friend. That friend now has a tasting token, and maybe that tasting token a way for that friend to be able to get access to Massican in the metaverse, right? Like that's their key to be able to come in and say, hey, I've tasted Massican, I really love it. Like now I want to interact with Massican in the metaverse. I think there could be something really interesting there where, again, you're expanding your community really organically by people that are in real life. We talk about the fact that it's digital, but really what we're doing, I think, is creating utility around real life experiences, right? Like somebody has to pour that wine for you, and then you get a tasting token, and now you can enter the Massican metaverse, wine metaverse. I think that's really cool, and again, it provides like utility and benefit.
And that's a two-way street too, David. It's like if someone just exists in Bar Massican in the metaverse, and they've been consumers of virtual experiences at the bar, that could translate to in real life experiences. That could translate to in real life access to wine. It could translate to merch and to other things. So the street goes both ways. I think it's again just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're thinking now about you know, about things that, like, I think our puny brains can kind of conceive of a little bit that we can do, but I think over time there will be, there's so much opportunity and so much utility around this, because it's a I see more opportunity in this than I've seen in anything in the tech world in a really long time. So let me just pause and say, does anybody have any questions? I'm gonna kind of finish here by showing people you know, some of the tasting tokens that we've been working on. These are unrareable. I'll actually put the link in the chat here. You can find it. Oh, there it is. I'm gonna put the link here in the chat if people want to go and take a look. But these are just tasting tokens that we've been putting out at the events that we've been doing. And we're actually doing an event on Monday for Provine. So if anyone on the call is going to be in Dusseldorf for Provine, let me know. We're happy to have you come to the event, and it's a way for you to get a tasting token if you don't have one. But you can see that these are all, you know, they're all little stories that we've told. Some of them, you know, we include scenes from the event where the wine was poured. Some of them we've got the winemaker. They're just, you know, these are just ideas that we've done. But I think the concept for us is this Yakem one is one of my favorites. But the concept for us is that eventually we'd work with the winemaker to kind of tell the story that they want to tell, and that could be anything from, you know, the winemaker. One of the ideas that we talk about a lot is, you know, the winemaker creates this, and maybe it's they tell the story of the wine at the moment, you know, when they make it, but the person doesn't see this tasting token until they open the wine, which could be, you know, 15 or 20 years later. So it ends up kind of like a time capsule, right? Like when you open that and you look at that, you look at that tasting token, you look at that NFT, you're seeing the winemaker maybe even talking about the wine that particular vintage from 20 years ago, and you're kind of carried through time and space back to that moment. And that's really special for me, because every time I drink a bottle of wine, like I want to be transported back to where that wine was made. So I find that to be a super kind of interesting piece. There's a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a couple questions in the Q&A. Daniel, great name, asking about, you know, passionate and getting access through NFTs. I hear what you're saying about there are a lot of people who don't have time, energy, effort, or interest in the blockchain or NFTs, but I look at my mailing list as a bell curve. You know, I have 5,000 members, my mailing list, and there's a percentage of them on each side that are going to fall off my mailing list, and there's a percentage of them on that are very small percent that are really highly in tune with who I am and what I'm doing, and they connect with me not only in my DMs but in text messages. And there's a lot of people right in the middle who have access to my wines that will never buy an NFT, whether it's Masakan or not. So I just think we have to meet people where they are, and we have to talk. We have to learn to be better consumers, or better marketers, better conversationalists. That people want to hear certain things, as opposed to just saying, here's my one message and this is what we're going to do. I'm not saying I would ever treat anyone disappropriate. I would treat everyone the same. My conversation with you about NFTs and metaverse is going to be a lot different than my conversation with people who just like to drink my wine at home on the weekend and have no interest in digital at all or tech. So I think, you know, this is just a singular conversation about a very small segment of the audience that's going to be part of this kind of movement.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, let me jump in and answer Alexander's question as well, and say, right now we're not storing the art on chain, and the reason for that is because we still haven't completely figured out what a tasting token looks like. In fact, we're doing a whole new revision of tasting tokens. Like, so all the tasting tokens we've made so far, we're actually going to redo all the art for them because we have got some new ideas. There's another piece to it, which is we're currently looking at the opportunity for people to be able to update. So when they open the bottle, they can actually add their own images, and not only add an image or a video of the event, of the tasting event where they open the bottle, add that to the NFT. So in that case, I'm not sure that we could put it on chain, although potentially we could put it on chain. We're looking at that. For right now, we don't think it's that important, but over time, certainly some of the wineries that we work with are going to want to put the art on chain, so that it is immutable and can never be changed and will be there forever. So I guess my answer, Alexander, is that it depends. Sometimes we think that in the future, sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't. That's really going to kind of be up to the winery and the winemaker, and it's going to depend on, you know, if they want to be able to update it later, and if they want people to be able to append their own kind of personal photos and video to the tasting token. And then one last question, then we're going to let everybody go. The question about allocation tokens, how do we prevent bots? I'll tell you, you know, that's certainly a concern, and it's a thing that we're, you know, right now we're in our friends and family phase with Club dVIN, and in order to avoid the bot problem, and also because we want to build an authentic community, right now the only way that you can buy a membership at Club dVIN and buy a membership token is to do a Zoom call with somebody on the team. Literally, like, you've got to sign up on Calendly and sit through a Zoom call, and then the team member will actually walk you through on Zoom. So that's a big part of it. Another thing that you know we're doing is we're offering, we do kind of commemorative tasting tokens, as you can see that some of them are here, the commemorative tasting tokens. So that a lot of times we're giving those away for free to the people that we know. And then with that commemorative tasting token, that's a key to be able to get in. So if any of you out there have a commemorative tasting token, just so you know, you can actually go in and buy a membership at the friends and family without having to talk to somebody, but only because you have that commemorative tasting token, you have that NFT in your wallet. So, you know, there are a lot of ways to do it. We're also running pre-mint, and pre-mint is a way to kind of combat bots. So I think that, you know, it's a little bit of whack-a-mole, but in the wine industry, I think for the most part, you know, nobody's looking to do these 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 NFT projects. You know, we're all relatively small. Like, we're looking at doing, you know, we're just doing a couple thousand for Club dVIN, but for most of the allocation tokens, you're probably looking at a couple hundred. And so you can almost give people access on a one-to-one basis, you know, like give them a special key and let them come in without having to make it open to the public. So I think that's the difference between what we're doing and what some of the other big projects are doing. We're really focused on community. We're not really out there to do a big drop and, you know, sell $100 million worth of NFTs. That's not really what we're doing. We're kind of going slow and really looking for authentic community. And so I think if you want to do that, it takes a little bit more work, but it's certainly possible to avoid the bots. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan, did you want to put a button on that?
No, yeah, just you and I spoke offline, for example, to this question about bots. You know, Masakan, we're not necessarily doing this allocation token as a drop on OpenSea. It's going to be to my mailing list. It's going to be the Club dVIN members, and then with that, you know, David, you know, said to me, you don't need to exchange crypto for the allocation token. It could be a purchase of something on my website as buying the token, and then the transactional will happen from an NFT side after. So if there are bots that actually can go in and put their name and address and access their account and have a, do all that thing and then put a credit card in and all, it's not just going to be link your wallet and then kind of like, scan, ether scan and like just blow it up, because all these things are sitting there because they have to be pre-minted. But yeah, so I'm not worried if it's Petrus or if it's Ravino or if it's something really, DRC. Yeah, I think someone will write the code to create a bot to try to get as many allocation tokens as possible. But I think you go into those high demand ones with a little bit more security on the front end. Masakan, I'm not worried about it. Bring on the bots. Bring them.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm gonna say goodnight. We went way over. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate you taking the time. I love the answers, and this is a really great discussion. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And thanks everyone out who got to sit here and listen with us. And hopefully we'll see you all in real life and drink a glass of wine and share some tasting tokens in the future.
Looking forward to that. All right. Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.